How's it going, everybody? So I'm still here in San Francisco, and the event with Ben Shapiro is happening tomorrow. So I thought, who better to speak with than Kiara Robles, who most notoriously, I suppose, was attacked by Antifa at the Milo Yiannopoulos event, right?
Yeah, that's right. That was February 1st.
That was a while ago.
So it's been quite a while now.
But this was like one of the Milo thing kind of sparked this whole free speech rally, and it became, it sort of, I guess it could be the start of all of this violence between Antifa and the right or whatever.
I think the inauguration was the very first time that I'd heard of Antifa. I was also there, but certainly the Milo Cal event was the one that they got the most obviously violent.
That's when it became more factional, more left for it, like people versus people, as opposed to during the inauguration.
People versus car, people versus property. Now it's people versus people.
Right. You started attacking people.
Right.
Yeah. So, but you're more than that. You're like a technologist.
Yeah, I'm a Bitcoiner. Definitely.
So I guess before we get into everything, you have a brief introduction?
Yeah, so my name's Kiara Robles. I've been a Bitcoiner for, I don't know, like four or 5 years or something like that. I work at a Bitcoin company. I rant about Bitcoin to anyone who will listen. I'm also a conservative. On my Twitter, I say things like pro-free speech, pro-free markets.
Are those exclusively conservative ideals?
Interesting question.
When people say
they appear to be today.
Right. Well, yeah. So I just interviewed this other woman I'm working with, Lauren, and she said that she considers herself right wing because she's pro free speech, and I'm like, that's scary to me. Like, free speech is something every American is supposed to be on board with.
Yeah. Well, I'm no longer a believer in that particularly as someone who's experienced
free speech.
The extreme left. But I've also identified as a libertarian and an ANCAP. Crypto-anarchist type deal.
That's why you're such an early Bitcoin person, I'd imagine.
Right. I've aligned myself with conservatives for mostly practical reasons.
All right. So I want to talk a bit about, for one thing, your background's really interesting. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are interesting in the decentralized nature. You know, we're dealing with censorship online. There's like this weird battle going on, and it feels like the Bay Area seems to be the epicenter, right? You've got the street battles at Berkeley, which has bled out into the rest of the country, and then you've got the tech companies headquartered here in San Fran, in the Bay Area, censoring and shutting people down online. It's like, it's all happening here. It's so weird. So the first thing I'll talk about is, why did they attack you? Do you know why they attacked you?
Well, they don't believe in a platform for fascism, for fascists.
Are you a fascist?
Of course not. In fact, I was cheering with them when they say things like "No Fascist USA." I was naive enough to cheer with those people, and they thought I was mocking them or something like that, I assume.
And I when I first heard what happened to you, because you were wearing a hat that said "Make Bitcoin Great Again."
Yeah. So again, because I work at a Bitcoin company, it was kind of like a trolley thing to do, and it was one of the hats that I could wear in the Bay Area more safely because it was more ambiguous. Like, people would be upset just because they see a red hat or whatever.
Yeah.
And I do wear like a "Make America Great Again" hat too, but I also wear a "Make Ethereum Immutable Again" hat. But how many people really know what that means, right? That one's great,
yeah.
So you don't get maced in the face.
But if it's a red hat with white writing on it, I'd imagine
people don't even read it. I assume
right.
She didn't.
Yeah. My assumption was that they assumed you were a Trump supporter just because you were wearing the gag hat.
Well, no. So at the actual event, what I was doing, I was one of the only identifiable Trump supporters, even if it was kind of ambiguous in nature, and I gave multiple interviews, and people were just like around listening. So certainly people understood what my view was, and particularly in that instance, my view was, well, what's the difference between free speech and hate speech? It's like I view the idea of hate speech as just everything that liberals disagree with is kind of a term that they use to throw at you. It's like, well, we support free speech, but we don't support hate speech. And then, you ask them what that actually means. Well, who gets to decide who gets to regulate what hate speech is?
What I found particularly interesting, because I've been invited to a bunch of these events with like far lefties. I went to a YouTube event, and it was about ending hate. Everyone there was hateful, I would say, to a certain degree. They said hate speech is a problem, so I asked them what hate speech was.
Right.
The typical response I got was, hate speech is speech that like, it's derogatory speech targeting an individual based on their race, ethnicity, identity, or something about them, their class. In which case, when certain groups say like Muslims are bad for this reason, it's hate speech. My response to them was, okay, then when you say white people are bad, that's classified in the same way, right?
No, because
well, the answer was no.
Of course not, because they're not taking a principled stance. So it's what's convenient for them in the moment, and because they also view in this like what would they call it, like some sort of hierarchy or structural privilege or something like that. Help me with the PC terms that they would use.
I don't know. There's yeah. privilege, I guess.
Privilege is one, right? So because whites have more privilege, or because they have a higher standing in the historical sense, then you're if you criticize them, it's justified.
Yeah,
that's just it. It's just justified.
What one of these guys told me was that punching down is bad, but punching up is okay. And they said because white people are above us, we can punch them because it doesn't actually cause any damage to them. but
yeah,
I think
it takes me a while to like to boot up that mindset. I have to like get into the zone before I can actually think like that. But no, I understand what you're saying.
It's a very collectivist point of view.
Sure.
That if you attack an individual, it doesn't matter because all white people will be fine. Obviously, I don't think that represents every single person on the left.
Yeah, I mean, the real problem of not being able to criticize groups is that sometimes groups behave differently.
Yeah.
And they're willing to recognize that when it comes to white people, and when it comes to like the success of like a particular group, and then they view themselves as being oppressed in a particular way. And obviously, some people have. There used to be laws that collectivized people in ways that were unfairly based on race or gender or whatever. And what, are we not allowed to talk about that either? Is that it's just a very confusing notion. Like you said, it's collectivism.
There's a really, really fascinating documentary I watched called "I Am Not Your Negro." Have you ever heard of that?
No, I've never heard of that.
But there's this civil rights leader, James Baldwin, and man, that dude's inspirational. There's this someone posted this video where he flat out says he's arguing for civil rights in the civil rights era, and he said, you know, people look at the black community as lesser than, and this is back in the 50s. But he flat out says, we are liars, we are cheaters, we are dictators, we are emperors. He's like, we are everything you are, good or bad. And I'm like, wow, like, dude was a genius. And today...
So what you're saying is that blacks have a history of all the same things that whites have a history of.
Like, I'll to quote him, or paraphrase him, that he said, humans are humans. We all basically do the same things. And that this, you know... But I'm bringing this up because it's like, these ideas that he had, you can't say these things right now. You know what I mean? Like, you can accuse white people of being the bad guys. But... mention that humans, regardless of their race, gender identity, whatever, are prone to the same behaviors. And, well, if you're white, you can't say that, right?
Well, I mean, I have no problem saying it. It's just a matter of what are the consequences, right? So one of the things that comes up in Berkeley is they'll say, like, well, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequences. Well, it should. And I could make that argument. It's like, I should be able to say what I want to say without getting maced in the face. You should be able to say what you want to say without getting stabbed or having your beanie taken off you, right? Like,
right, but that's not freedom from consequences. You know, the way I described it is
violent consequences. That's what I mean specifically.
Physical harm.
Yeah, and you don't even have to speak in order to be against violent consequences. Like, that's just already a law. Right.
It's. But I guess
one of the interesting things I've heard from a liberal friend recently was like, well, isn't it funny that conservatives are fighting for rights they already have? Like, well, we already have free speech as a right, so why are you fighting for it? In the same way that women already have all the rights that men have, so why was there a women's march? And I thought about that for a while because, at least to someone, it sounded like an interesting contradiction, right? I mean, I guess to me the problem is, though, is like, how do you know that you actually have a right? Is it like when it's written down on paper? Is it when people in power tell you have it? Or is it when you can actually go out on the street and like prove...
I think that's what it is.
Right, that's what I think it is too.
You can go out and speak without being physically harmed.
Right, and how many liberals in this state, well, because we're talking about the Bay Area or California, right? Like, how many liberals can go out and say things that are incredibly controversial with no negative consequences? Like, in Google, you can say things like horrifically offensive towards white people, and white people will like bury their heads in the sand and say like, well, you know, like, they have a point. They'll will openly admit that they have, like, some points, right, and concede that openly. And that's perfectly fine because I have no problem. I don't feel a threat from people having a different opinion than me.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting thing that's happening in the Bay Area because the majority is so liberal. They've gotten very totalitarian with that to an obvious extent.
Well then, moving to the
Even
present.
though I'd agree with a lot of their points, they've pushed me in a different direction.
What do you think is going to happen tomorrow?
Oh, the Ben Shapiro event. You know, it's talking to the Berkeley College Republicans, it's hard to say. I mean, they think the event will go on. I know Antifa has shown that they're capable of multiple strategies. So during the Milo event that was right after the inauguration, so obviously they were very upset at the way that had gone, right? They didn't, clearly not Trump supporters.
Yeah.
So they were very, very angry at that particular point. And then there were several like in-street events that had happened. I've only ever attended speeches, so I tried to attend the Milo speech, the Ann Coulter speech. Now I'll be trying to attend the Ben Shapiro speech tomorrow. I haven't particularly gone to rallies per se, but there have been times where, like, there are speeches in parks and stuff like that, and you cover all those events.
Yeah.
Right? So,
well,
there were times where they didn't show up.
Right, yeah, on the 27th.
Right,
when
it happens.
Gavin came, gave a speech. I think the funny thing, and one of the more frustrating things for me, is that these group of people, like these Antifa people, they post a ton of lies about me, right? And I hate to blanket statement them, but like this is the brand of the group, because there are some people in Antifa. I was in Portland, and they came up to me and they were like, "You're awesome." One guy,
Antifa.
Yeah. Antifa guy came up to me and he whispered, he was like, "I can't say this too loud because you know why, but I think what you do is fantastic." And he was like, Black Clan Antifa. I had one Antifa chick in Portland, did a double take, turned around, and I went, "Oh, here we go." And she walked up and she was like, "You're so cool." And I was like, "Thanks, man." Because, like, you can be opposed to fascism and not be a crazy, violent,
Of course.
It's just that, unfortunately, these are the people who dominate.
To psychoanalyze some of these people just a little bit, I think a lot of the kids who end up in Antifa, at least in Berkeley, are unfortunately kind of like on the streets to some extent. Like, there's a lot of street kids in Berkeley, so maybe they came from a middle class neighborhood, maybe they came from rich kid neighborhood, doesn't really matter. Like, now they're kind of like street gutter punk kids, and maybe they have a home to go to but they don't want to go, and it's like there's so many drugs in Berkeley, and it's like all like psychedelics, and like they're smoking pot, and the value system almost kind of encourages that, along with promiscuity. So they have all these, unfortunately, somewhat liberal values that have told them that all these behaviors are okay. I don't think it's to their benefit. And then on top of that, it's like they think they're doing something good for the world. So they come out and the media makes them think that they're fighting fascism, right? You're not a fascist, I'm not a fascist. Some of those Antifa kids admire you. Some of the Antifa kids, when I talk to them, we agree on Bitcoin. I think that power ultimately corrupts, and there are certain systems that I do not trust, because if I view them as having a gun to my head, like which I do for the government or the Federal Reserve or something like that, right? How could I trust an entity that has a gun to my head? That's not called trust anymore. You just do what power tells you to do. Or you resist it, right? And that's their whole movement, is resist, resist, resist. It's a disagreement on what is actually happening, and a disagreement on the means by which you should achieve change, even if that was happening. Like, I would never condone violence in the streets to the level that they've done it, and the property damage. But they don't view property rights as anything legitimate. So there's a lot of psychological reasons and class reasons why they are in the position that they're in that are interesting, but it doesn't ultimately justify the sad life that they're choosing to live.
What I can't seem to understand is why we can see these videos of really kind of horrifying things, where, for instance, in Berkeley just a couple weeks ago, there's like an older guy, looks like he's in his late 40s, maybe 50s.
I know who you're talking
trying
about.
to stop the violence.
Yeah,
and
I met him.
They chop him in the neck with a shield, push him to the ground, pepper spray him, splash urine on him, and he's clearly not a fascist or white supremacist or anything.
But his problem was he was trying to speak to them. That was his problem, is he actually wanted to communicate and have dialogue. And they don't want that, because that would actually make them have to think about something other than, well, we're doing good, right? Like, they have fundamental beliefs already that are ingrained in them, and to challenge that is very, very difficult when they've already gone to Hot Topic to buy all their black clothes for the evening, right? Like, they've invested.
I would imagine they actually go to Goodwill or Salvation Army.
Oh, that's right. Okay, sure.
But
the hipsters, maybe they go to some, like,
cheaper recycling. Look, they might be violent extremists, but they have values.
It's donated from.
What I can't understand is the people that I knew growing up that were all about opposing violent oppression are now defending a group of people that would attack innocent bystanders. I mean, it is now widely accepted in the media, right? The New York Times op-ed the other day on Ben Shapiro talks about how innocent bystanders end up getting beat. People who try to stop the violence end up getting beat. And I'm getting messages from these activists that used to stand up against oppression saying, yeah, but it's acceptable when Antifa does it. And I'm like, I will never find it acceptable for someone to attack an innocent person. Like, I can understand defending yourself and fighting back against a system and all that stuff. That,
of course, we're all pro self-defense. Like, we're not encouraging you to just get beat up for no reason, right?
Right, but even to that extent, when they say things like, the police force has a history of abuse in this area, so we're going to fight back against it.
Again, with the collectivism.
Sure, but at least I can say, okay,
I have a court system for that.
But I can understand why they feel that way, right?
Yeah, I understand it too.
I can't understand why they would feel it's okay to to knock an old woman down in Boston, or to start pepper spraying an old guy who simply was just trying to stop violence.
Yeah, well,
that doesn't make he
were just he was just trying to talk to them. That's it.
But there's no logic. It's like I can't.
No, but that's it. It transcends logic.
It transcends above logic.
It's fifis.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I mean, I don't. I guess it's more.
It's a more fundamental value than logic.
mob mentality, but no. Outside of that is why the activists would set what I cannot find a reason.
I mean,
for that.
in the same way that you're puzzled about the activists on the street, I'm equally puzzled by the activists in the ivory towers, right? Like I had a professor at Berkeley who like contacted me after that, and she was like, "I'm so sorry about what happened to you, but I really wish you would be smarter." And I'm like, I posted an entire thing about what happened and like what I believe in. Like, could you actually talk about any of the comments? Like, could you actually talk about anything of substance instead of just like, I wish you could, like, I feel bad. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, I got maced in the face. I'm dealing with like legal stuff. Like my friend recently just got fired for his conservative views. Like, she has no idea because she's in the dominant narrative. So her view is like, it's just a bubble. Whereas like if you're a conservative in this area, it would be insane to say that I'm in a bubble because I barely know any conservatives. So it's like all the conservatives I do now have an ANCAP background, so that's also not it's not an adequate representation of what conservatism would be like in like the South, say, right? But I've lived there too, and I've lived in the East Coast, so like I kind of have an idea. And I guess it's just what really, really puzzles me is that how someone at a mainstream university could not see that they're in a bubble and that could not condemn violence on the streets.
You're supposed to.
I don't understand it. These people are supposed to be educated.
That's what
they're
I mean.
They're the ones
like,
educating, and it's just.
I assume these people are the ones who are plugged in and better understanding and learning, but
well,
it seems like
I should have known better because she told me that she actually came to work in Berkeley because of what was the not black rights, not the civil rights movement.
Free speech?
No, but it was particularly
anti-war.
There was a movement that was particularly slightly more violent. It was the Malcolm X version of.
Yeah,
and that all started here in the Bay Area too. So she came, and she's a white woman, so she came here specifically for that. Which I kind of raised some eyebrows, but I didn't take it too seriously when I initially met her.
I remember when I was younger, talking about college, which I did not go to, but my mom and a bunch of the other people were like, "You would love Berkeley so much.
What?
You should totally go," because it's like it's like an activist lefty thing, and that's what I consider myself. But
okay, so
it's like
is activism the same?
I mean,
as
when
propaganda?
I was younger, I should say.
No, I'm asking you because in a way, people think you're some sort of activist, right? You see yourself as more maybe of a neutral type, not journalist, but
I'll clarify because the only reason I use journalist is because it's the easiest way to explain it to the average person. But if I were an activist, it's an information activist. So
right. So is propaganda the same as that? Because you saw that's right. So what is that called? What is it called when you think you're an activist, but really you're spreading propaganda that you've been brainwashed to think?
Well, you're
an idiot.
No, that's activism. Like no. What I'm saying is, an activist is pushing they're pushing a cause, and that means a lot of times they're going to put out one-sided or hyper focused, I guess, information.
Calling Ben Shapiro a fascist.
Well, they
makes
think
them an activist, or does that make them intellectually lazy?
No, it means
dishonest.
Or just wrong. Ignorant.
I guess
the point I'm making is that an information activist, right? The hacker community and the friends that I had, we don't care about who's.
That's a great thing to bring up. Go for it.
Well, we don't care who's right or wrong. We care what's right or wrong. So the information activists are like, is the data there? All we want to do is make sure the data gets out there.
So the way that they view it, I think, is that they don't really care how they get their view across as long as it gets across. So it's not about necessarily what's objectively right or wrong. It's just how if they win. So if it's a tactic to call Ben Shapiro fascist, I don't think any of them really believe that. I don't think any of them, like the majority of them probably haven't even watched his
No, I would say the majority of them do believe it, but the smart ones who are actually organizing know better.
I mean, when I walked around with a Make Bitcoin Great Again hat or like a Make America Great Again hat in Berkeley, there are some people who are quiet there who are like, wow, like that's really cool. Like there's a French guy who like ran up and like gave me a hug, right? So there are obviously people who don't want to share their opinion in Berkeley because the left is so totalitarian about their particular view set right now.
But that's every city. Berkeley might be the worst, but I've talked to people about New York, and I asked them, like, what do you think would happen if you walked through New York wearing a hat? And they're like, hell no, I would never do that.
No, I lived in New York. I could walk in Williamsburg just fine. And
you think you'd wear the hat, you'd be fine?
They look at they look at their feet because you just dominated over them. It's very, very, very different. It's very different.
You think if you walked around Berkeley with that hat on, you'd get messed with?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
In daytime, it's happened. So
That's scary.
I mean, I'm not doing it for the lulz. Like, I don't consider myself a professional provocateur, right? Like, and I I admire the people who are willing to do that, because we do actually need some fucking lulls from all the drama that's happening. It's like politics is so serious sometimes, and the only way to get through is with laughter. So I admire that.
It's very trolly of you.
To even admire it is trolly of me.
Well, like what we just said, basically, that we need the lulls.
I need the lulls. Well,
Yeah.
I exist on the internet. I live in the Silicon Valley, right? So it's like, I understand why people do it. It's just not what I'm doing, and the fact that they'll even push violence against just an average person on the street who they don't know, who isn't, who isn't a professional provocateur, shows the lengths they're willing to go to.
But with all the media coverage in the past few weeks, and now even like I mentioned, the New York Times op-ed about Ben Shapiro, here it is. The violence from the far left and Antifa is recruiting conservatives.
So
it's
is
killing their
recruiting
movement.
conservatives, and what I've actually learned in the process as a recent conservative convert, is that this has been going on for a long time, just in different ways. Like, there's a reason why Ann Coulter is popular. There's a reason why Ben Shapiro is popular and Ben popular. They're not new to conservatism. It's like they've always experienced hate from the left, which is why they play into it. It's why people like Milo exist, is because they're like, okay, I can get twice as much media coverage. I can get the people who hate me to cover me, and the people who love me already. So
Yeah.
it's a tactic, and people on the right don't hate people on the left to that extent. I don't like maybe
No, they do.
maybe Rachel Maddow, but she
I
can come to Berkeley safely. I mean, come on.
I have some friends who are like progressives that are very, very despised by the right, and the stories they tell me are very similar to what I hear from people so personalized on the right tell me stories about how the left doxes them and attacks them, and then personalized on the left say very similar things. The difference is we're not seeing conservatives go out in the street with masks on in clubs and showing up at progressive events and beating people.
Right. And then the liberals actually have, an entire class of people who are willing to do that, where it's just even conservatives, like what was it, the working class voted for Trump.
Yeah.
More or less, right? So.
Well, nobody wanted Hillary.
Nobody
it was
wanted Hillary.
It was, what was the bumper sticker that was really funny? It said, "Okay, Hillary, I guess." 2016. Or
Dang.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, because people wanted Bernie.
I mean, it would have been interesting to see an actual debate between Bernie and Trump, the two outsider candidates.
Yep. I think Bernie would have won.
Well, I mean, we can all speculate, right? But he couldn't even win against Hillary. So what does that say?
Yeah, but he couldn't win against Hillary for complicated reasons.
Well, because she cheated.
Right.
And you don't think she would have cheated against Trump? I'm sure she did too. Didn't it just come out that she took there was an error in New Hampshire.
I heard that. I don't know the full details, but yeah, there was a voting error or whatever.
Right.
I mean, New Hampshire's a blue state anyway, though. Okay, so we've gone long. Tomorrow is the big event. Do you have any predictions or any final thoughts on this whole?
It's impossible to predict. I mean, I hope it goes safely. Eventually, a conservative will have to speak on the Berkeley campus because it is a public university. They receive taxpayer dollar. If they're going to continue to receive taxpayer dollar to the extent that they are, they need to protect the First Amendment, right? They need to protect freedom of speech. They need to actually embody the values they claim to have. And this is not going to stop. Like, there's Free Speech Week, and this is just 2017. Like, they don't know what they have going for them if they think that conservatives are going to stop.
Well, supposedly Bannon's going to be here.
Right.
That's going to be.
So it's going to get worse for them, right?
Battlefield.
Like, does Daddy have to come down himself and like wag his finger? Like, I don't know. So it's
really
all just
interesting.
more bad press for them. It's like if they were to have just let the very next speech occur, this all could have blown over much faster. I'm trying to give them advice right now. Maybe I shouldn't be.
No,
Good
it's bad
Lord.
press, but at the same time, it does help them recruit.
More extreme.
The more the system pushes back on them, the more they can say, "Look, the empire is attacking," and things like this. When it came out that
asking to speak on their campus is tantamount to an attack.
When the police lock the building down and say the protests aren't allowed, they say things like
you're allowed to protest peacefully,
and that's what they say. And they
come dressed in all black with masks.
Sure, but they're not going to people and saying we show up with Molotov cocktails. They're going, we just want to peacefully assemble, and the police won't let us, and they use that to recruit. And then they show selective information.
Well,
propaganda.
they're recruiting idiots that are going to waste their lives. So I feel sorry for them.
An idiot who's wasting their life can still hold a club.
Luckily, they can't hold guns.
Well, I mean, we're starting to see that, but I guess we'll see what happens. So, Kiara, thank you for talking. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys so much for hanging out and watching. So stay tuned because tomorrow is the big day, and I don't know exactly what will be happening. Maybe I'll be live streaming. It just depends on what happens. So you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Timcast, If you want to support my work, make sure you go to timcast.com/donate. Give whatever you'd like or give nothing at all. My videos are always free and available every day at 4 p.m. Stay tuned for periodic live streams. And like I said, possible breaking news tomorrow. And then some worldly events, because there's a possible revolution about to happen in Spain with Catalonia. And stay tuned. That's going to be fun. It's going to be really scary for a lot of people, but the police are going. So I'm looking at that, and that's around October 1st. Stay tuned, because tomorrow is the main event. I'll see you then.